Welcome to the Longevity Protocol with Dr. Cristina Bosch and Dr. John A. Robinson. We'll be your guides to uncovering the secrets to optimal health, better sex, and happiness. From debunking aging myths to exploring the science behind what it means to live the Longevity Protocol, we'll dive into a wide range of topics. So, get ready for an exhilarating journey in what it means to live well and feel your very best at any age. We're back.
Yes.
Everybody has been talking about the GLP-1 agonists, the semaglutide, tirzepatide, these usual suspects. We have been certainly talking about them for a long time now.
Yeah.
Prescribing them for over 3 years. We were early adopters of using these medications.
They're good.
Yeah, they work.
Mm-hmm.
They work. Why are we hearing so much of a buzz out there? Because it works.
Yeah.
It often can work at sort of a detriment. There could be a problem with it, just like anything in medicine. It's, not what you do, it's how you do it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I want to get into that today.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about some of the particulars with that again, and then talk about some of the new things that are coming out regarding these GLP-1 agonists.
Great.
This overall thing.
Okay.
So when it comes to semaglutide, that's the OG, that's the original one that first was brought to market. This is what everyone started talking about initially. This is the Ozempic that everyone was and is still talking about, even from a brand standpoint. Yeah. This molecule is semaglutide, and it is a GLP-1 agonist and a glucagon-like peptide 1 agonist. And it's pretty amazing what it's doing, right? I mean, we've seen this with countless patients.
When used correctly, it's fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
When you say, for everyone so they understand, what does use correctly mean?
Well, I mean, we've touched on this a little bit before, and I guess that's probably what most of our conversation today will be about, will be the idea of it's not what you use, it's how you use it, because we're going to mention a few medicines that can achieve that fat loss aid. But when used correctly, to me, is that these medications shouldn't be fat loss medication. I don't think that's what they're for. I don't think that's how they're successful. And I definitely know, I don't even think that's a matter of opinion. I know that if you're using it as a fat loss medication, that like everything else, you probably will yo-yo with your fat loss. So used correctly means that you're using these medications as true aids in allowing your metabolism to work more efficiently, and then combining it with appropriate lifestyle modifications, additional supplementation, hormone replacement, et cetera, so that you are rehabilitating the chemistry of your body.
And the metabolism. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another thing we've been talking about for a lot of years, the metabolic rehabilitation process for patients.
Since the beginning of opening our practice.
Right. And that's, I think, more specific, or it is. It's definitely more specific. And to your point, it's not just about the fat loss. Or sometimes we'll say it's about self-care. And the side effect of self-care often can be fat loss or other improvements in your energy, et cetera.
Right.
It's
if you're longevity minded, then you should have a healthy body composition.
Yes.
Right.
So, with all that said, everybody's using these things largely, at least in their mind and their perspective, they're doing it because, hey, I want to lose fat. And it is true, it's doing that. Just want to make sure we're explaining it that. But we're approaching it in a more comprehensive way beyond just simply saying fat loss.
Okay, sorry. I just have to say that people are saying that because they don't necessarily know that the reason they have fat gain in the first place is because the metabolism needed to be rehabbed. In other words, people are saying, I'm using this for fat loss because they don't actually understand what's needed and how it's changing. So it ends up being a little bit of just out of ignorance or lack of education, people are asking for something without understanding what it's really doing for them.
Sure. And that's ultimately up to us to be able to describe what that is. That's, that's a good point too. You can get these medications online. You can get them cheaply. I've seen them be very underdosed and many different problems. Or just the main thing is they're not getting the attention with a provider to be able to talk about these kinds of things, have a relationship with the process, of the overall goal of what they really are wanting and needing for their overall health. We see that even with hormones when we're dealing with patients who come in for the hormones. And I often say that you didn't come here necessarily for that. You think you did. You came here for relief, or you're feeling a certain way and you want to feel a different way.
Right.
But that's the only way you can figure that out is through a relationship with someone that knows what they're doing and looking for that, and it's a give and take. So it's still true. Again, I keep coming back to it. It's fat loss. I'm only saying that because that's, what people are talking about. Just to make sure do you concede?
I shall for now. Go.
Well, it's important to say that too, because I would like to differentiate. We do not ever want weight loss. We want fat loss.
Oh, for sure. Well, that's very easy for me to say. Yes.
And so we want to preserve muscle, if not actually gain muscle. One of the key side effects of this medication, without question, is a loss of muscle. It is ramping up the metabolic rate in such a way that we're unfortunately seeing muscle loss with patients.
Yeah.
We don't see that, generally speaking. And the key reason is we're harping on them about their protein intake. We're giving a very calculated number for them to be able to focus on, to be able to preserve their muscle. And usually our patients are using some form of hormone replacement therapy that further enhances that. And they're not losing muscle. I have had many patients actually gain muscle while they're on semaglutide and tirzepatide.
Definitely.
So,
and overall feeling better.
Absolutely. Yeah. And often you don't need a whole lot. Sometimes people were getting overdosed. Mm-hmm. They just didn't need as much in order
and a lot of those patients that have found their way to us after either trying to manage themselves through these online techniques or perhaps using fat loss focused medical facilities instead of metabolic rehab focused, they maybe got skinnier, but they're not feeling well. Mm-hmm. They look older, they feel older, their energy has gone down. So,
it's a cost when it's done that way.
When it's done that way, correct.
So there's really three key versions of this I'd like to talk about. There's actually many out there. You don't really hear about them, and many of them are still in sort of research phases. But the three that I'd like to talk about today, well, we can start with Ozempic, because it said that, the semaglutide, the OG one, the original gangster version of this. And then it evolved into, and what that's doing is that's affecting one route. It's a single mechanism. The second version, or tirzepatide or Mounjaro, that is dual action. That's affecting the GLP-1 and it's affecting GIP as well. So just sort of another angle, another type of receptor as it all relates into the gut and the overall metabolism.
Right.
And that's been pretty effective.
Oh, super.
I'd like to give everyone an update about tirzepatide.
Yeah, this is important. I've actually had patients now starting to ask, so this is important.
So we just recently found out about this, that tirzepatide, and we get our medications compounded. We do this because it's far more cost effective for patients, and it's always available because there's been issues with the actual trade names of these medications not being able to get them.
Right.
So we get them compounded from reputable compounding pharmacies that are very much, they have oversight.
So they get made to order.
Made to order, absolutely. Right. And again, incredibly effective from what we've seen. So you were allowed to compound tirzepatide because there was a shortage on Mounjaro. And so it was on a shortage list. And then by law, if it's on a shortage list, it is allowed then to be compounded in order to supply, the population, to meet the demand that's out there.
Right.
So that is now supposedly come off of the shortage list. And now it will essentially become impossible for people to get the compounded version of tirzepatide. Mounjaro, of course, will still be available if you can even still get it. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there will still be a problem. A lot of times it's about whether or not insurance is going to cover it, because out of pocket for straight Mounjaro is going to be far more expensive than actual compounded tirzepatide. So just make sure everybody understands that. Now, fortunately, before this even came to light for us, we were already thinking ahead, because we always think ahead with these things. And there is a newer version that had been going. We even knew about this one about a year and a half ago when we first saw it in phase 1, phase 2 trials. It's now through phase 3, and it is now available, compounded, it's available. This one is called retatrutide. So it's available from a compounding standpoint, but it is not available as the actual, once probably not somewhere between, as I was reading, somewhere between 2025 and 2027 before it will be fully available through the company that originally sort of made this, but you can still get it compounded just based on the way the laws are. So retatrutide seems like it has some advantages, where with semaglutide, we'll see those side effects. The gastric upset, that's probably one of the most common ones. You saw a little bit less of that with the tirzepatide, although I think with tirzepatide, we were seeing it later. We weren't seeing it on the front end.
I think it was just the initial usage.
Yeah, it was less, but then it kind of caught up with itself after.
I think so, yeah.
We started observing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so now retatrutide, this is hitting, it's a triple agonist, meaning it's hitting GLP-1, it's hitting GIP-1, and it's also stimulating glucagon.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps to further lower blood sugar. So it's really effective. It is new for us from a prescription standpoint, but we do have some patients on it. So far, I've heard no negatives, calling up and saying, well, I'm having more nausea than before when they were on the other versions. Not hearing that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been only maybe about a month or so of prescribing that. So we'll have to kind of get that feedback. Once we start measuring and seeing how effective it was. But my sense is that it's going to be just as effective, if not probably more effective, because it's hitting 3 different angles.
More than one mechanism of action for success.
Right.
And again, changing the metabolism.
That's one of the big effects of all of these types of medications, but it seems like with retatrutide, it is really affecting metabolism because it's also very much digging into visceral fat.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that it was from early on studies, it was shown to really, really help with visceral fat. And that's, and very, very difficult to treat types of obesity.
And visceral fat will be that fat that's surrounding the organ. So a lot of times I'll describe to a patient when they say, I feel like I'm fat in the midsection. I say, okay, does it feel like it's more of a pinchable fat or like this distension?
Yeah.
That inside fat, that distension is traditionally harder because it's more of like the marbling of the tissue. It's a lot harder to lose, but it is also more closely correlated to chronic inflammatory diseases.
Yes.
So of course, being able to affect visceral fat is not just aesthetically important, but it is a longevity
goal. Absolutely. So hopefully with retatrutide, we're going to see that added benefit. It's true, though, that with any of these, we've seen a loss of visceral fat, with the advanced measurement scales that we're using, we're able to see that. And we're seeing the benefit. I mean, usually
patients should know that. Like, they should have some objectives for success, I think, instead of just going by how they feel. They should have some objectives, like the way we track the body composition.
Mm-hmm.
The flip side of that is don't rely only on the objectives. Sometimes you just feel better. Like sometimes you can just tell my clothes is fitting a little differently or, because rarely is fat loss a nice, smooth, straight decline. It's, usually a little bit of like a up and down.
It's an up and down, ebb and flow. Yeah. Absolutely. Speaking to that, patients will feel better mentally and emotionally on these medications. I've definitely seen that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I want to speak to that real quick because I just want to be really clear. There have been reports now of the potentiality of suicidal ideation with these types of medications.
Right. We talked about that.
We have talked about that. And I keep kind of seeing it come up, and these are very, very off the wall type of examples. And there's not anything super common about it, about to that extreme. But I have seen both things. I have seen many, many patients say, I just feel better mentally, emotionally on it because they're probably just regulating blood sugar and
cortisol.
And cortisol. And those variations in blood sugar and cortisol are going to make mood go all over the place.
Right.
So there's a stabilization of blood sugar, so there's a stabilization of mood in general. But I have had some patients say to me when they're on it that they feel a sort of, I don't know, like they're blue.
They're like désolé.
Yeah, désolé. And I think in part, and this is just sort of a theory, we were just talking about, sort of the passion of food and why food can just be so important for us. And you get a pretty good appetite suppression on these medications.
Mm-hmm.
And so something for a lot of people that they feel gave them some level of joy, or quite literally we're giving them a chemical shift.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
food often provides a serotonin and or dopamine and other neurochemical shift for people. And then now they're not eating and they're used to getting that shift and now they're not getting it. So they just,
high.
yeah, exactly. So they're just sort of feeling bad about it. But I think that comes down to also how slowly someone's getting put on it, how closely they're being watched. They're able to actually have a conversation. Again, these things came up to us, we're just talking to patients because we always sit down and say, how are you feeling? We give them space and time to describe what's going on. And then we go, oh, okay. And then you can listen and then start to do something about it.
Those conversations are really important because if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh yeah, I've noticed that, then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what are you noticing? Are you noticing that because you're not as hungry, perhaps you're not finding yourself going to lunch dates with your girlfriends, or you're not having dinner together as a family because you already had a little something. And maybe then what you're really missing isn't so much about the food, but it's about the connection and the relationship that we have as social creatures revolving around food. But it may be something else. It may be like you were eating junkier food that had chemicals in it that are addictive chemicals, that are feel-good chemicals, in which case, well, we don't want you to go back to your addiction just so you can feel better. What we want to do is understand this is a cause for that. And then how am I repairing that? How am I replacing that? What am I doing so that I can renormalize brain chemistry, just like the chemistry of your blood sugar management?
Sure. And this can be mitigated through dose changes and sometimes literally just drinking more water. I think that's probably one of the biggest things.
And eating.
Fat loss.
I mean, you have to eat. There's a big difference between appetite and hunger. People say, I'm just not hungry. And I go, no, you're hungry. The human body is asking for some form of nourishment about every 3 to 4 hours. What you may not be is registering appetite. So that's discipline. It's a matter of eating with frequency until you can reconnect with your hunger signals. Because they might just be dehydrated or they may be getting low blood sugar. And that's when we talk about, or both, and that's when we talk about not using those medications correctly. If you're just using it for fat loss, you're not eating, you're losing fat, you're happy, but then what? You're not actually staying healthy. You're losing muscle, et cetera, right?
Right. And we can actually talk about muscle too. These are called peptides. And the term peptide has been used in many different ways, but I would say in the past 7 to 8, 9 years, everyone was saying peptide therapy. We were talking about this. We were, again, early adopters with these very advanced, rather elegant and simplistic medications called peptides. And then when the GLP-1s came out, the semaglutides, et cetera, they were calling that a peptide, and it is. But I think now the term peptide has just been, because everyone's talking about semaglutide, et cetera, that they're just thinking about peptides only as that type of medication.
Meaning that now people are equating peptides with fat loss.
It's just those medications and those medications related to fat loss.
Obviously not correct.
No, not at all. Peptides, there's a massive array of peptides out there. Actually goes back to the 1970s, right? Yeah, and they're doing many different things.
Yeah.
Some are neurological benefits. Some are helping with weight loss or fat loss. Some are helping with muscle building. Some are helping with your immune system. There's all kinds of peptides out there. And they are quite elegant because the word peptide means a small, as you know, a small little string of amino acids that's smaller than a protein. So it's kind of like amino acid is the super building block, the little tiny individual component. Then we have a peptide as a small little string, and then a protein is just a larger string. So we're saying a peptide, it's a small little protein type of molecule that has the ability to communicate messages within the body. A hormone is a little bit larger, and that's communicating at the level of at the nucleus. But these peptides are communicating at the level of the cell membrane. The reason why that's important, I'm not trying to kill everyone here with science, but the reason that's important is because when it's affecting things on the membrane, there's just less side effects.
Right.
So again, very elegant and very easy, clinically forgiving to utilize these medications. They're often injections. Yes, it's a medication, but the side effect profile is incredibly low.
It's kind of like Like if you think of a peptide as a messenger, it's like your boss is sending you an email saying, hey man, you got to work harder, you got to work harder, you got to work harder. And then you've
had a boss say, hey man?
Yeah.
Really?
When I talk to myself.
You're the boss.
I'm the roughest. I'm the best boss I've ever had.
Yes, you are. You're very good. Everyone always says that. They're very lucky to have you.
Thanks. Sorry. Okay. What was my analogy? Hey man, hey man, hey gal, you got to work harder. And they're sending you messages saying work harder. Then it's up to you to actually work harder and change the situation. A hormone is when you're actually just being fired and they're bringing in someone else to do the job, right? So
quite abrupt.
There's a bigger side effect to being asked to work harder versus having your job be lost. So the peptide is a message to the cell saying, perform in this way.
Yeah.
Whereas when we're talking about hormones, we're actually doing hormone replacement.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And the way it's affecting the level of the nucleus, it's just more of a direct, it's smacking things around.
Wait, am I the best boss you've ever had?
You're my boss? Is that what you're saying? I guess maybe you are. Yes, you're the most fantastic boss. I listen whenever I'm told. And I never argue back.
That's such a lie.
I never have my own opinions. Yeah, so what else? So that's what the peptide means. I thought that was important to explain that. One of the most common peptides that are out there, it's something called sermorelin. And sermorelin was an FDA-approved medication for children with short stature because it's a peptide that communicates with the cells of the pituitary to tell the pituitary to secrete growth hormone, secrete and release growth hormone.
Right, which is not the same thing as growth hormone replacement.
Correct. And so a gentler way to go about it.
Yeah. And cheaper.
And much more cost effective.
Yeah.
And we've seen really good results with that. It's a great way to improve from a more subtle way, a more sort of metabolically shifting type of way for growth hormone. And then we're bringing this up to say this is a peptide and it's another peptide that can help with weight loss.
Yeah.
Because human growth hormone, once it's stimulated and released, is really good with that visceral fat. So back what we were just saying about retatrutide.
Right.
So
and muscle building.
And muscle building, where you're not really getting as much direct muscle building with the semaglutides, tirzepatides. You're not going to get direct muscle building with that. You got to make sure you're doing things correctly around that. But this, you're going to actually get a stimulus for muscle growth.
And that's the thing about peptides also, since we talked about two things. One of them is cost comparison and then also side effect profile. So what makes peptides such a nice therapy, like with the sermorelin? Definitely I've had people that it wasn't a remarkable benefit. Okay. But it was such an relatively inexpensive
experiment
and safe experiment that it's worthwhile, because if it gives you those results, they can really be impactful in changing your body composition, your longevity for relatively low investment.
Sure, that's true about almost anything we do. When it's right, it's right.
Yeah.
When it's the thing that just helps that patient, it can be life altering. And then, because that's why they call it practice medicine, we're practicing these concepts, we're seeing what's going to fit and work for that individual. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't exactly the way we would think.
And sometimes it does for a while, and then it doesn't. So this is the other reason why those online services for ordering your peptides, like your fat loss peptides, for example, are not a great idea, because you're going to be, let's say you start on the semaglutide and then after a while you're like, this isn't quite getting me where I want. Then through proper guidance and analysis, then you can determine, for example, we would work with a patient to say, okay, well, you're still having some fat loss, but it's not as remarkable. And now you're starting to have a lot more muscle mass loss. So why don't we change the formula? Why don't we change the combination of things that we're doing? Because the goal here isn't to spend money to get skinny, only to stop a medication and get fat again. The goal is to change your life and enhance your wellness for the purposes of longevity. And to feel really good and look good in the process.
I had a new patient the other day, and she came in and said she had done, I think it was semaglutide, and it was some online thing. And I said, how did it go? And she said, well, it wasn't great because I had some side effects. And then when I told the nurse practitioner, whoever it was on the other side of the phone, I had these things. And she just sort of threw her hands up and went, well, I guess it's not for you. And then that was it. There was no sort of discussion. There was no sort of, how do we massage this and figure it out for you? It was if that patient in this online scenario did not fit into the box perfectly, it didn't matter because they weren't sort of invested in the relationship. The provider was not invested in the relationship. It was just either you're buying the stuff or you're not.
Yeah.
And
they're not invested in the wellness outcome.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's it, we're always in the cutting edge with all these types of things. But in the end, it's really just about the wellness outcome. Yeah. It's about the foundational concepts of how to get somebody well. And then from there, using these tools in the right way, in various ways, in order to get the outcome that they're wanting and needing and deserving. So that's Sermorelin. There's another one called MOTS-C. And we prescribe this from time to time. This one's interesting because this MOTS-C is affecting the mitochondrial function. And what's important, I brought this up just because we've been also talking about metabolic rehabilitation and how that very much is also about mitochondrial rehabilitation. Mm-hmm. And what are the mitochondria? These little organelles, this tiny little thing that's inside your cell that's the powerhouse of the cell, that's helping the cell.
Mighty mitochondria.
The mighty, that's
did everybody learn that?
That's how I learned it. Like Mighty Mouse, isn't that how we did it?
I don't remember Mouse. I just remember mighty mitochondria. Yeah. But isn't that funny, the things that stick out in your head? Anyway, they were mighty. They made energy.
Yes.
Or they make energy.
Make energy, ATP.
And they are passed down through the maternal line.
Yeah, isn't that great?
So cool. That is really cool that they've used mitochondria to trace everyone back to like Eve, essentially, that to whatever your Eve is. Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
So I guess the mitochondria's got some pretty cool things about it. That's one thing. It's definitely making energy. It's also associated, there's different, and we're always talking about longevity here, obviously on the Longevity Protocol podcast. And that is one of the theories of aging. And there's different ones. Some are about hormones going down, and that affects aging. Right. Mitochondrial function is one of the theories of aging, that if we have lowered and affected mitochondrial function, we're going to age.
Right.
And so back to MOTS-C, this is one of the things that's actually helping with energy production. If we don't have, one of the most common things that we've been working with for years is thyroid. So thyroid hormone is affecting mitochondrial function probably almost better than anything that we have in our body. But again, this MOTS-C has the ability to help with mitochondrial function. And this in turn is helping with stimulating glucose utilization. And that in turn helps with fat loss. So that is definitely one of the ones.
And energy, because fat, glucose, why is the human living system, why does it bother with fat and glucose in the first place? Is because it's a source of energy. I mean, that's essentially the definition of life to a certain extent, right? If you take the concept of soul and emotion and intellect out of it, if an entity has no energy, is no longer living.
Yes. So MOTS-C, this is one that people could consider, aside from just these regular semaglutide, tirzepatide, and now the retatrutide. That would be something else to consider. Now, we talk about muscle. We talk about the benefits of muscle and why that's so incredibly important to maintain or gain the muscle while somebody's on any kind of fat loss program. And what we also will offer are injections of glycine along with some branched chain amino acids. And glycine is really important because it really does drive, and there's research behind this, it really does drive muscle preservation and muscle growth. It's a signal molecule, in this case an amino acid, to be able to help with muscle. So when it is a little bit challenging sometimes on these, I don't care what somebody's doing with their fat loss journey, it's preserving muscle is always key.
Or even if they're not on a fat loss journey, loss of muscle is directly correlated to rapid aging.
Absolutely. There is no better biomarker to understand where somebody's at in their aging process from a longevity standpoint than having muscle and preserving muscle throughout the health span.
Yeah.
That's the key. And beyond that, then of course we'll say grip strength and some things that are really related to muscle mass and strength. These are just great biomarkers. Yeah. We're always talking about blood work and all these different really cool biomarkers, and there's many of them and we should look at them. But in the end, holding on to muscle, preserving it is what's going to help determine.
Yeah, but holding
longevity.
on to it implies you had it in the first place. So, this isn't just a problem for those that are aging. This is definitely a major concern for our younger population as well. And we are seeing the patients get younger and younger, whether it's obesity in 20-year-olds or challenges of
lack of testosterone,
fertility issues, not enough muscle mass. This injection is great, especially since you can capitalize on that youth where they're going to have an easier time building that muscle in theory in the first place, right? So this injection's great for that.
And we've been using it, and we do see that it's certainly helping. It's very easy to do. For those patients or people listening that wouldn't have access perhaps to an injection, glycine by itself can be taken orally. The dose would be right around 3 to 5 grams. So that could be done also even in conjunction with someone who was doing the injection. So it's just, glycine's easy. It's one of those amino acids that doesn't sort of taste funny. It's kind of easy to do. It's great for your gut. It's got other benefits. So that's the muscle shot. I just wanted to make sure we brought up and how that can kind of help.
I'm kind of obsessed with that concept of the muscle.
Yeah.
Well, I remember when I first started working out.
You're talking about personally now in your own personal journey.
No, not just, but I will share my personal. When I first started really working out, because I was always a very active younger person, but let's say in my mid-20s that I really started working out.
Who influenced that? Did you know anyone that influenced your working out for muscle? Was there anyone you know?
If I hadn't met John Robinson, I would probably look like olive oil. You were a great influence and more importantly, a great aid in my discipline, which I think is very important, but not the point. Like Buffy, those like role models of mine.
Yeah, your hero, yes.
And then I went to the
Buffy
gym.
the Vampire Slayer.
Yes, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Well, is there any other Buffy?
I mean, love that show. And then I went and started working out with my trainer, with Alana, that from Enerjoy that you guys will see me post a lot about. She's still, all these years later, still working out with me. And I remember I was like, yeah, I'm so strong. And then she gave me these dumbbells and I was like, oh, I can't lift that. And she ended up giving me like a pink one. She wasn't.
When you go in the colors,
it was just
light
because that's what the color. I remember thinking, when am I going to be out of the colored dumbbells? I was like, how the hell am I not stronger?
Yeah.
Well, this is 20 years later, right? And I'm finally out of the colored ones. Yeah. But why am I obsessed with this? Because I have definitely seen the wave across all ages, mostly with women, because that's usually who's at the gym where I work out, how that semaglutide look.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not good.
No. It's not good from a health standpoint. It's not good from a visual standpoint. No, it's definitely not good from a health standpoint. No, that is not good. And you're going through this process of losing fat, but you're not really thinking about how when you're having your own weight is weight resistant, so it helps keep your bones a little bit stronger. If you're going to lose that weight and you're not replacing it with muscle mass, not only do you start having that like draggy skin and all that isn't so cute, but it's really not good for your bones. It's not good for your brain. Your brain needs those nutrients, amino acids for function, for repair. This is extremely important. We can't just get skinny. We've got to get lean. Yeah. They're not looking at it that way, but hopefully people are listening to what we're saying here. In closing, I think you just kind of mentioned some things. Any other longevity strategies for fat loss and muscle building? I think you brought up some pretty good ones there.
Be strong. It's very empowering. Women talk a lot about empowerment and being physically capable is such an important part of maintaining your wellness and maintaining your longevity. Knowing that you can tend to yourself because you're physically able to do so, or that if God forbid you fall and you have an accident, that you can recover because you have those reserves there to do so.
Muscle provides that stress resilience.
Muscle, definitely. And the right amount of fat. And look to healthcare professionals that listen to you, that engage you in conversation, that understand your relationship with food, that understand your goals when you're talking about losing weight. Are you really talking about losing weight or losing fat?
Yeah, right? I think, yes. And I think men, particularly, I think the idea of having the stress resilience, having the competence and the confidence that you feel with exercise and what just comes.
Oh my
with
gosh,
that.
yeah.
I mean, just that ability to be able to respond.
Yeah.
We all want to be able to do that when we can.
Mm-hmm.
Just makes us functioning better, I think, in the world. Men want to be able to feel useful. They want to be able to feel competent.
Yeah.
And I think for me personally, weight training has always been that thing.
My primary inspiration for weight training. No, but really,
we've done a lot of gym time.
We have.
Yeah,
we've always said it was like a good date, good foreplay.
Right, exactly. Yes, because I've taken pictures of you during the process. That can be.
That sounds gross.
No, well,
even though really it's more for my like form or for my. At least I say.
Yeah, because you say, yeah, how do I look while I'm doing it?
Right. I want to know my form. I want to know my progress. Right.
And that's all I use it for. It's just that. Right.
All right. So I would say my last remark is remember that we are staying on top of trends and changes and availabilities. We are that resource for you. And other than the fact that I find retrotried. It's so hard to say.
Woman, what did you just...
See?
Retatrutide.
Retatrutide. Okay, I'm going to have to look at that. Look, other than it being difficult to say, I
say
do
motorcycle.
Motorcycle.
Anyway.
That's really how I say that. Come on, I'm trying to make a useful point here.
Excuse me.
I think that's going to be a wonderful medicine. So don't just get stuck with hearing that that's not available or that's not for you or you're not a candidate or ask questions, keep searching, know that we're out there providing you those answers and those options.
Healing is always
an
option.
option. Yeah. Thanks.